10 patients, one operating table. This shift went wrong fast. Fluorescent lights of the St. Jude's ER hummed, a sickly counterpoint to the insistent beeping of monitors. I scrubbed my hands raw at the sink, the harsh soap doing little to wash away the metallic tang of blood and the gnawing feeling in my gut. Another head trauma from a bar fight, another wasted life clinging to the edge. Elias, Mallory's voice cut through the noise, calm and steady as always. They're prepping room 4. Motorcycle accident, possible ruptured spleen. I sighed, catching my reflection in the stainless steel. The face staring back was etched with exhaustion, the lines around my eyes deeper than they should be for a man not yet 50. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to summon the focus I knew I'd need. On my way, I mumbled, grabbing a fresh mask. The familiar weight of the surgical gown settled around me like a shroud. Mallory met me at the door, her blue eyes sharp and assessing. "You okay, Doc? You look like hell." "Just another Tuesday," I lied, pushing past her. I knew she saw right through me. She always did. The OR was a controlled chaos. Ben Carter, the eager but green resident, was already there, fiddling nervously with the suction. The anesthesiologist, Patel, was prepping the patient, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20. His leather jacket lay discarded on the floor, ripped and stained with blood. The surgery was routine, if messy. The spleen was indeed ruptured, and we spent the next hour battling to staunch the bleeding. Ben, bless his heart, managed to stay out of my way, handing me instruments with trembling hands. As I tied off the final suture, I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. I gripped the edge of the table, willing it to pass. "You good, Elias?" Mallory asked, her voice tight with concern. "Fine," I snapped, perhaps too harshly. "Just tired." The radio crackled to life, shattering the relative calm. "Mass casualty incident on I-90. Multiple vehicles involved. Estimating 10 critical patients en route. St. Jude's prepare for immediate trauma surge. 10. My heart sank. We were already short-staffed, stretched thin by budget cuts and a nasty flu season. This was going to be a long night. The next few hours were a blur of controlled panic. Patients arrived in waves, each with their own horrific story etched onto their battered bodies. A pregnant woman pinned beneath the steering wheel, a truck driver with a crushed chest, a family of 4 ejected from their minivan. We worked tirelessly, triaging, stabilizing, and rushing patients into the operating rooms. The air was thick with the smell of blood, antiseptic, and fear. Ben was visibly overwhelmed, his initial enthusiasm replaced by a stunned silence. Mallory moved with the grace and efficiency of a seasoned veteran, anticipating my every need. The first anomaly was small, easily dismissed. During the surgery on the pregnant woman, the overhead light flickered and died for a moment. Patel grumbled about faulty wiring, and we continued. But then the suction unit inexplicably stopped working, forcing me to improvise with sponges. Later, during the thoracotomy on the truck driver, I swore I saw a shadow flicker in the corner of my eye, something impossibly dark and fleeting. I dismissed it as fatigue, a trick of the light, but the feeling of unease lingered. As the night wore on, the anomalies became more frequent, more disturbing. Instruments went missing only to reappear in odd places. Vital signs fluctuated wildly, defying explanation. Patients mumbled delirious phrases, claiming to see things that weren't there. Elias took a swig from his flask. The burn was familiar, but the relief was short-lived. I found myself becoming increasingly agitated, my hands trembling as I struggled to maintain control. I started drinking more heavily, sneaking pulls from a flask I kept hidden in my locker. Mallory caught me once, her expression a mixture of disappointment and concern. "Elias, you need to stop," she said, her voice low. "You're not helping anyone like this." "Mind your own business," I snapped, pushing past her. I knew she was right, but I couldn't stop. The pressure was crushing me, the weight of responsibility unbearable. I needed something to dull the edges, to quiet the voices in my head. The surgery on the family of 4 was a nightmare. The parents were dead on arrival. The 2 children, a boy and a girl, were clinging to life. We managed to stabilize the boy, but the girl, no older than 6, was fading fast. I worked frantically, battling to repair her internal injuries, but it was no use. Her tiny body was shutting down, her vital signs plummeting. And then it happened. As I reached for a scalpel, I saw it. A fleeting glimpse of something in the corner of my eye. A dark, shadowy figure hovering near the operating table. It was gone in an instant, but the image was seared into my mind. The girl's heart monitor flatlined. "Time of death, 3:17 a.m., Patel announced, his voice flat. I stared at the lifeless body on the table, a wave of nausea rising in my throat. I ripped off my mask and stumbled out of the OR, gasping for air. I found myself in the hospital chapel, a small, quiet room tucked away in a forgotten corner of the building. I sank to my knees, burying my face in my hands. "What's happening to me?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "What's happening to this place?" I felt a presence behind me, a coldness that seeped into my bones. I turned to see Hal Grimshaw, the elderly security guard, standing in the doorway. His eyes were filled with a strange knowing. "This hospital," he said, his voice raspy with age. "It's seen a lot of suffering. They say it was built on an old burial ground. Sometimes when things get bad, something wakes up." "Wakes up," I scoffed. "What are you talking about, Hal?" "There are things in this world, Doctor, that we don't understand," he said, his gaze unwavering. "Things that feed on pain and fear, things that can twist reality." I wanted to dismiss him as a senile old man, but there was something in his eyes, a deep-seated fear that resonated with the terror I was feeling. I went back to the OR, fueled by a mixture of fear and adrenaline. The remaining surgeries were even more bizarre. A patient's bones seemed to melt before my eyes. Another's skin turned an unnatural shade of gray. I was losing my grip, my mind teetering on the edge of madness. During the final surgery of the night on a young man with severe head trauma, everything came crashing down. The power went out, plunging the OR into darkness. The backup generator failed to kick in. We were left with only the dim emergency lights, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. I fumbled for my flashlight, my hands shaking uncontrollably. As the beam of light swept across the room, I saw it again. The shadowy figure, this time closer, more distinct. It was hovering over the patient, its form shifting and swirling like smoke. I screamed, a primal sound that echoed through the darkness. I lunged at the figure, swinging my scalpel wildly. "Get away from him," I roared. The scalpel sliced through the air, meeting no resistance. The figure vanished, leaving me standing there, panting and disoriented in the flickering light. The power flickered back on. The OR was as it should be, save for the palpable sense of dread. Ben and Mallory stared at me, their faces pale with fear. "Elias, what was that?" Mallory asked, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know," I stammered, my mind reeling. "I saw something evil. The young man on the table was dead." The night finally ended, but the horror lingered. The hospital slowly returned to normal, the operating rooms cleaned and sanitized. The staff tried to forget what they had seen, to explain it away as stress and exhaustion. But I couldn't forget. I knew that something terrible had happened that night, something beyond explanation. I knew that the hospital was not a safe place, that it was harboring a darkness that could not be ignored. I quit drinking. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, a hallucination brought on by stress and alcohol. But deep down, I knew the truth. A week later, Mallory found me in the break room, staring blankly at a cup of coffee. She slid a faded photograph across the table. It was a picture of the hospital grounds, taken decades ago. In the background, barely visible, was a group of people dressed in dark robes, performing some kind of ritual around a makeshift altar. The altar was located on the exact spot where the operating rooms now stood. "I found it in the archives," she said, her voice barely audible. "Hal told me where to look." I stared at the photograph, my blood running cold. The truth was undeniable. Something had awakened that night, something malevolent and ancient, and it was still there, lurking in the shadows of St. Jude's. I looked up at Mallory, my eyes filled with fear. "We have to get out of here," I said. "We have to leave this place." She looked back at me, her expression unreadable. "Where would we go, Elias?" "This is our home." I knew she was right. We were trapped, bound to this place by duty, by loyalty, by something I didn't understand. As I left the break room, I heard a faint whisper in my ear, a voice that seemed to come from the very walls of the hospital. "You can't leave," it whispered. "You belong here." I knew with a chilling certainty that the hospital was not done with me yet. I knew I would never look at my profession in the same light again.